So let's take a look at some of the pros and cons of serverless. So here are some of the pros of serverless computing. The cloud provider takes care of most of the back-end services. So this would be things like provisioning and scaling. And we do have auto scaling of the services. So depending on load, the service will scale automatically. You just pay for what you use, and you pay after you used it. So pay as you go, and that can be huge for startup companies. Many aspects of security are provided by the cloud provider. Now, if you've used any of the clouds, you'll know that you still are responsible yourself for many aspects of the security. But a good deal of infrastructure is provided already by the cloud providers, and they're very good themselves at security. So you can get good advice there too. As I said, patching and library updates are taken care of by the cloud provider. And the cloud provider provides many software services such as user identity, chatbots, storage, messaging, etc. And typically somebody like AWS or Google or Azure would have 20 to 100 of those services that you can build on. And because you're building on these large blocks of services that are coupled together by these Lambda functions or Google functions, Azure functions, that leads to shorter development time for getting your ideas into production. And the cons, well, in this new architecture where messages are being passed from function to apps to other functions, managing state is quite difficult. And so you have to focus on that. As we mentioned before in previous modules, that one of the things with web services is that they're stateless. So the way that you keep state is that you need a back-end data store of some kind where state will be stored. We mentioned complex message routing and event propagation. So now we have the incoming message from or request that's being propagated from one function to an app to other functions, and so the routing can get quite complex. And when you have a bug, it's quite difficult to trace exactly the route that that bug took through your software. For some of the services, there is higher latency. In general, this shouldn't be a problem, but if your service is asleep a lot of the time, it has to be loaded into a container and spun up, and that can take some time. But if you've already got some scale, your functions will already be are being used all the time, then that shouldn't be a problem. And finally, there's obviously vendor lock-in, though today with the clouds, it's fairly easy to move between those clouds. But that's a consideration. So those are the pros and cons of serverless, and we'll go into more detail about some of the architecting principles. Bye for now.